Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I have with me Dr. Ben Sidders, Chief Scientific Officer at Biorelate, a company leveraging advanced data science methods to transform the focus and impact of drug discovery and development. Ben has spent 2 decades leading data science teams at both AstraZeneca and Pfizer to pioneer and apply novel data science methods for drug discovery in oncology, neuroscience, and infectious disease. And today, we'll be discussing how integrating causality in AI for biotechnology can drive greater R&D success. To kick off then, Ben, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself to listeners. Tell us more about your journey to today and the passions that drove you along the way.
Well, hi, Nicole. It's a real pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me. I mean, really, my passion sort of stemmed, and the reason I went into bioscience was to have a positive impact on disease and patients. And really, initially, when I was young, I was very fascinated by this concept that very small pathogens like viruses and bacteria could have such a dramatic impact on us as relatively big and lumbering beasts. So I did my PhD in tuberculosis, and during that process, patented a diagnostic, and that really opened my eyes to kind of, if you like, the commercial power of bioinformatics within life sciences. So to follow that on, I decided to join Pfizer, personally in infectious diseases, and so I worked on HIV and HCV for a while. And then moved into the neuroscience. And in all, I spent 10 years at Pfizer and really learned the ropes of drug discovery and what it meant for a data scientist to have a really impactful role within a drug discovery program. I later moved to AstraZeneca, and I spent the last 10 years working on oncology, and then was most recently the head of the oncology data science group for the early research function. And I had great pleasure to build a tremendous department of fantastic people, covered everything from the portfolio of bioinformatics to more blue sky kind of computational biology and AI methodological research. However, in terms of where I'm currently at, I had really back at Pfizer started to experiment with networks and our understanding how biological systems have this sort of interplay and the proteins within us interact within each other. One of the fundamental issues, though, was that the interaction maps that we were using were very rudimentary at the time. And that's the law. So at that point, I started a collaboration with the University of Manchester, and we created a studentship to deliver on a project where we would extract from the literature a whole suite of these protein interactions and, if possible, regulatory interactions, but also with all the context around them. So we could tell whether 2 proteins interacted with each other in a particular disease or in a particular tissue. And that meant we could build these really context-specific disease maps that we could then study for new targets and for, in this first instance, drug repositioning. And that first project, we had this tremendous success in neuropathic pain, where we doubled the hit rate for the project that we were on time. But interestingly, for this story, the student undertook that project, later sort of spun the concept out into a company which is called Biorelate, and that's where I find myself now. So I've just recently, in the last few months, joined as the CSO. And so we're kind of really enjoying this ability to focus now on how this network understanding, how these graphs can be brought to really enhance our study of disease, the targets that we're trying to find with the on-farms.
Thank you, Ben. Quite the journey then, if one can say so, and moving between the sort of different focus areas as well with your work and research. So if we think about this transitioning, pharma R&D itself has undergone a number of transitions and is in the midst of yet another great transition, our focus today, one that is a data-driven, AI-enabled mode of drug discovery. So where traditional pharma has long relied on biomedical literature to identify new targets, typically with very low throughput, an AI-first way feeds all the data into a technology black box and permits accelerated output. But for AI to truly revolutionize drug discovery, it must move beyond pattern recognition and predictive analytics to include causality, which is essential for technical and regulatory success in drug discovery. So, Ben, tell us more and set the scene, please.
So I think, we must appreciate that AI is having a lot of success, a lot of impact within drug discovery at different parts of the pipeline. For example, in chemistry, there are now incredible applications to help the design and synthetic route planning of small molecule drugs. In pathology, there are incredible algorithms that help interpret the images that come from patients and diagnose disease or prioritize a particular treatment for a particular patient. And really, those successes come in areas that there is a lot of ready data, and there's a lot of standardized data, and they're relatively clear problems that we're trying to solve. I think the real next frontier about the real excitement for where AI is going to impact now and going forward from here is in sort of the slightly murkier fields of biology, where target discovery and understanding patient response to therapy, that kind of thing. But of course, this is quite a different space to play in, because the biosystems that we're studying, we don't fully understand. We don't have that complete data set that we can integrate as we do in pathology, for example, or train an algorithm with. So we have to think of slightly alternative ways to understand the problem. And it also means that we're never likely to come up with kind of predictions that are really going to necessarily be 100% accurate every time. So we have to really build into this process a triaging or a validation process that's really going to take the findings from these sort of AI algorithms in the more biological domain and feed them into a system that's going to make a difference. And then, of course, within the bioscience space or within drug discovery, we have to satisfy various stakeholders, in particular regulators, who need some sort of explanation as to why things happen. So it's not enough to say this drug might work in this disease unless you can explain why or how it works. And really, that's what we mean by causality. Can we really put together the chain of logic that says, we've made this prediction and this is why? And this is not really new. I mean, if we think about drug discovery or target discovery over the last few years, there's been this incredible groundswell of effort into studying the genetic basis of disease. And really, that's because a genetic association between a gene and disease essentially is a causal association. So if we have a mutation in a gene, and that then goes on to cause disease, we can infer that there is some sort of very specific role for that gene in the pathology of that disease. And really what we'd like to do is try and sort of bring some of that logic into the way that AI works, so we can have a much more tangible impact on the process of drug discovery.
Thank you, Ben. So these notions of validation process, of the whys and the logic being put into the process, how does it literally work? How do you train the model for this causality?
Well, firstly, this is an open field of research, so there's a lot to still be done in this space. But you fundamentally need to incorporate some of that mechanistic knowledge of biological systems into the predictions that we're making. And one way to do this is to use cause and effect relationships that we have discovered or have been characterized in the past. And we can essentially collate these, chain them together, and they can build a graph, if you like, a network. But also we can put them together into more formal frameworks like a structural causal model, which encode all of these causal relationships. And they define, parameters around how they interact and, noise terms and all sorts of other things to really model this kind of real-world system. This then enables us to make predictions with an underlying kind of causality as to where that predictions come from. This can also, apply to sort of certain fields like, graph RAG, which we've seen as becoming really important with the rise of the LLMs. So the large language models, which we, like ChatGPT, which we, have a question and answer interface to. If you put the underlying graph underneath, you can really constrain the results of that query. And perhaps in the way that happens now, that doesn't really necessarily imply that it's going to return you a causal or mechanistic answer. But I think there are real opportunities to build some of these more formal causal models into the transformer-based architecture of the LLMs, such that when we do ask questions of them, or when we do use these models, impact some future form, they are returning to us a much more kind of coherent and educated mechanistic basis for why they're associating two things together.
Thank you. I like this notion of coherency off the back of the logic mentioned earlier, and this sort of AI network model for that network of biological systems you mentioned at the beginning. So if we put it in a nutshell, literally, succinctly, what benefits, if successful, this research undertaken at the moment, what benefits can it provide biopharma at large?
Well, firstly, the hope is that this will unlock novel biology. I think if we can, kind of leverage these systems, we should be able to predict or connect new things. But I think fundamentally, this will really increase the confidence that we have in any prediction we might make. So, for example, if we predict a new target is associated with a disease, we can have much higher confidence in it if we can see the mechanistic logic behind why it's affecting the disease. And that also then guides the downstream experimentation. So, we then raise the success rate of our drug discovery programs, across the board, because we have this underlying mechanistic understanding. And also, it should do it faster, right? We should be able to generate these kind of hypotheses really rapidly when we have the systems engaged.
Thank you. So, mechanistic logic, putting together the whys and wherefores of disease effects. So it kind of preempts my next and final question, which is, as ever with these podcasts, to gaze towards the horizon. So if we are following this process of causality within AI, of training the models to permit us this validation process and logic networking, to ensure that AI can contribute, as you said, meaningfully and transparently to the advancement of biotech and drug development, what next in a temporal framework? Would it be a case of 5 years? What with technology, everything is always sort of faster than we generally ask within the life sciences. What's the 5-year to 10-year plan next, Ben?
Well, I would really hope that we build towards a future where we have really effective digital surrogates. So digital representations of the cells, the patients, or even the cohort level of patients that we are trying to study, trying to manipulate with our drugs, such that we can then ask these kind of questions in silico. If I were to turn this protein down, what effect would it have on the cell? Or if I were to activate T cells in this patient cohort, what effect would it have on their response to drug? And I think, we're seeing this kind of come to bear a little bit. The rise in single cell sequencing efforts, the rise in spatial transcriptomics is really allowing us to do these probably cell-based digital surrogates. And I think, to get to the next level, the patients and cohorts is the dream. And I think if we can get there, then we can have a really fundamental shift in the way we do drug discovery, enabled by some of this AI technology.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your other podcasts from. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.